Councillor John McGee.
Yeah.
Councillor Tom Cook.
Yeah.
Councillor Ian Linton.
Yeah.
Councillor Fiona Campbell.
Here, thanks.
Councillor Claire Maitland.
Here.
Councillor Claire Leach.
Here.
Councillor Neil McGee.
Yeah.
Councillor Jim Roberts.
Yeah, Christine.
And Councillor Jackie Todd.
Yeah, thanks, Christine.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thanks, Christine. Just call now for any declarations of interest. I don't think there's anything obvious. Members, anything? No. And okay, go to item 2, which is the Play Park investment plan, and taking us through that is Kevin.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. Members, the report in front of you gives an update on the recent investment funding announced by the Scottish Government, and asks members to consider the implementation and approval of a prioritisation programme to upgrade play parks across East Ayrshire for this fiscal year. Members, if I can take you to the background of this report outlined in paragraphs 2 to 5, that informs members about the agreement, the joint agreement with COSLA and the Scottish Government to appoint £5 million worth of funding to Scottish local authorities for the upgrade and improvement to our play parks. This is part of a planned investment of £60 million over the parliamentary term. Members, we have 84 adopted play parks within East Ayrshire across all of our communities, and they've been installed over a period of time, the oldest going back to 2002. As a plan, as a result of the Scottish Government funding, a sum of £112,000 was allocated for this fiscal year. However, we do anticipate our fair share of that £60 million over the following years. We estimate that it should be in the region of 1.344 million. However, that is still to be confirmed, and it will hopefully allow us to do a programme of investment over the next 5 years to all 84 of our facilities. Paragraph 5 outlines, really importantly, the benefit that that play has for children and young people in terms of their wellbeing and their development. Members, if I can draw you to paragraph 6 to 9, which kind of outlines the current play park conditions. And a condition report was carried out in September of last year, assessing all of our play parks against 4 particular categories: usage, condition of equipment, age of park, and surface condition. When considering these, a prioritisation list was established, recognising that a number of our play park equipment is still in reasonable condition and only needs some additional paintwork done, some surface repair. But we do recognise that some of our older parks need upgrade in terms of inclusive play equipment. It's our intention to provide that opportunity access of inclusive play equipment within our older facilities and freshen up other aspects of our play parks, as well as outlined in paragraph 8. To give context, members, in paragraph 9 we outlined to fully replace a play park would cost in the region of £90,000 to £130,000, given the fact that a single play equipment piece could cost anything between £12,000 and £15,000. Members, the next section, paragraphs 10 to 13, outlines the engagement process in line with the national principles for this upgrade monies. We will work with our communities to see if we can enhance further and engage in terms of the investment programme, making the investment work for our communities. And we will absolutely do that in line with local communities and in particular our children and young people. It is important to say that we do have a dedicated framework in place through procurement in terms of the installation of this, and we would utilise our council's nominated contractor for this programme of work. The proposal, members, outlined in paragraphs 14 to 17 is based on that assessment of play parks that we have carried out. We have established a programme of priority with 12 play parks identified to receive upgrades as part of this 21-22 investment, and that's outlined in Appendix A of this report, and will involve some painting and surfacing programme as well. Investment for this year requires to be completed or at least ordered this fiscal year, and will be further supported by Housing and Communities balances of £41,000, anticipated at delivery and installation timescale of approximately 6 months from date of order. Members, additionally, there is a periodic inspection of play parks across East Ayrshire and will at times identify equipment that will need to be repaired or replaced there and then, and it is proposed that we draw that a draw of £100,000 each year for the next 5 years is approved from the Council's renewals and repairs funds in order to take this work forward. The annual draw from said fund will supplement the play park investment funding that has recently been announced by Scottish Government. This will provide an opportunity to extend the prioritised programme of works. Members, this particular report in terms of our community policy and community planning implications is absolutely in line with our community plan key themes of safer communities and wellbeing. It's also important to say that it is in line with the ambition of our transformation strategies, vibrant and empowered work streams, as well as forming part of the authority's green infrastructure strategy. There may be scope to consider play parks and street cages as part of future capital investment programme, however. Legal implications, members, is outlined in paragraphs 20 and 21. I repeat the bit that we actually have a dedicated framework through procurement for this work. There are no human resource implications as a result of it, and I can advise members that an inequality impact assessment has been carried out. In terms of financial implications, members, we are required to at least order monies up to that £112,000 for the Scottish Government funding. It will be supplemented by balances within Housing and Communities. In the programme of work through the Play Park Investment Fund, we'll see improvements planned for all 84 adopted play parks. This will be, as I've mentioned, enhanced by the renewals and repair fund draw. In terms of risk, members, it is important to say that we do have a regular and safety inspection programme in place, and that will support the working lifespan of such facilities. Members, the appendix is there in the report that gives the programme, and I know that in members portal we have also put the full 5-year programme that we anticipate based on the condition survey that we have done. I would refer members to the recommendations just at the end of paragraph 1. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Kevin. Just a couple of points. Just one, a very minor point. Just New Farm Loch. New Farm Loch is a big area. Whereabouts in New Farm are we talking about there? I think there's more than one part. Do we know that offhand? Or?
Offhand, I don't know the name of the particular part, but I can get that to you, member.
Okay, I think that'd be helpful, just because I know there's more than one play part in New Farm, that we make it clear what one we're doing. The other issue, just having a look at the number 84 play parts and looking about that, and I know the historic reasons for this, but there's only in Kilmarnock North, for example, there's only 2 play parks. And that's an area where we've got a growing population and we've got high incidence of deprivation in that area, and we've only got the 2 play parks. I think, and similarly in the north end of Malmon ward, adjoining that, and it's a high area of deprivation. And I know the historic reasons with the fire at Alton Hill, for example, where play equipment and the rubber mat and some over 10 years ago was set on fire, and that was a bit of a tragedy. But I think we really need, particularly in areas with deprivation, we need to look at that closely. And I think it's a similar situation in Shortleys, that we've got to provide play equipment. Just because it's targeted by the vandals, the children in these areas shouldn't lose out. And you're just not affecting the programme that's there. Maybe that's just something that as an aside we should look at. We shouldn't let the Vandals win. That's what I think. I'm sure what I'm trying to say, and that's something we can look at future. Katie.
Yeah, thanks through you, Leader. Yeah, this report focuses specifically on existing parks, but we are willing to look at wider provision again and come back to Cabinet in terms of money available, as previously discussed. But this one specifically focuses on existing programmes, but we will look at that for you and come back.
Thanks, Katie. Okay, that's Matt Tubbinsworth. There's a number of hands up. John.
Aye, Dougie, aye, thanks for that. But I think there were a number of folk in before me. I'm happy to take my turn. But if folk don't mind me going first, I'll go first.
I can't see that. You're speaking now, John. I can't see the list. I'm getting Christine. She can see the list. I just saw your hand up, your physical hand up. On you go, John.
All right. I think it's a good paper and but I have got some questions about it. If I could just ask two or three questions. I think on the background, I think the original commitment was to renew every play park in Scotland, but I don't think that's really feasible because a lot of the play parks maybe don't need renewed altogether. But if I'm taking it on the figures that Kevin's given us, that would be £8.4 million we would need to renew all our play parks, which is an eye-watering sum of money. But I'd just like to go to paragraph 4, where we've got £112,000, which I take it is 2.24%, and it's a while since I've left the skill, but at 2.24% of the share. So we seem to have made the assumption that we're going to get 1.344 million, which is 2.24% of the remaining 55 million. So if we have no doubt that we're going to receive that money in the future, I was just wondering why we can't take on board some of the leaders' comments regarding some of our play parks, why we can't accelerate the programme, why we can't talk to the contractor or go to another contractor. Okay, what's the point of having this programme stretching 5 years when we could do it in 2.5 years? And we could use the money for other accounts, knowing that the 1.344 million is coming, no unless, as I say, paragraph 4, we've got doubts about that money coming. And we could accelerate the programme so that if Councillor McGee and Comores at Morton Park is standing next to a refurbished play park, that another councillor's no standing in Morton Park, New Mills, be nothing done to his, and it's not getting done for 5 years. So I was wondering why we can't accelerate the programme, knowing that we're going to get the money in anyway. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. No, I would agree if we can accelerate the programme where we can. Speaking as a Ward 3 councillor, where there's nothing in the first year, I'm all for an acceleration of the programme, John. Joe.
Thank you, Chair, and through you, I'll just give a response to the financial part of that, but there's clearly prioritisation issues, which I'm sure colleagues will deal with as well. I suppose, if you take the 2.4%, that's £120,000, and we don't get £120,000 from this, we get 112, which shows that instead of using that broad 2.4%, they're using 2 GAE indicators, which give us the £112,000. Those things are not stable, I don't suppose. I don't know whether or not over those 5 years to come that those same methodologies, those same indicators will be used to distribute the remaining £55 million. And so that's why you're seeing that variation between the 2.4% and the 112,000 we've got. I suppose, we don't normally recognise this income, this share of £60 million in this way, where it's been told that we'll get it in due course, with a methodology that I think, if I'm honest, is still going through the discussions at COSA and elsewhere around what the final distribution would be. For us, I think we recognise that in year one, as Kevin set out, £100,000 from repairs and renewals, 41,000 from service balances, and 112 showing that in year one, £253,000 of a spend, 56% of that being incurred by the council, showing that commitment towards the play parks. But what I would suggest is, as a response to the main question around the forward recognition, I would perhaps just not urge caution as such, but just ask members to wait. We know that the Cabinet Secretary is undertaking a spending review. The first work on that has commenced. It's due to be published around summertime this year. That hopefully will give us some indication of our settlement for the next 3 years to come. And within that full envelope of funding, there will be certainty around the methodology that will be used to distribute that remaining £55 million of play park funding across Scotland.
Thanks, Joe. But my understanding, year two begins then, that 1st of April 22. So would there be any harm in putting year one and year two programme together to be done within the next financial year? Would there be any harm in doing that, and as a way of accelerating the programme?
I suppose it's about the certainty around that funding. We know we will get a share of the remaining 55. The actual quantum we don't know yet. It would be for us to identify the funding that would come again from repairs and renewals. That fund already has £500,000 taken out of it for this remaining, which leaves around £1.4 million left in that fund against a number of calls that will come in from services at the year end. It's something that could be done, Chair. I would propose that instead we wait to see what further information comes out of COSLA and the Director of Finance around the final distribution of the remaining 55 and perhaps that year two quantum as well.
Thanks, Joe. Okay, who's Claire Leach? Claire.
Thanks. Really tough to see us coming. Wayne's love a play park, don't they? And adults alike, if you've ever seen me at the play park with my wee lassie. However, I think the good point here is that all Waynes are now going to be able to enjoy play parks with the installation of inclusive equipment. Ken, anything we were able to do to support further social integration where there's previously been barriers to do this is absolutely fantastic. And all children and young folks should be able to enjoy the same play, and it's a shame currently that they're no. So to ensure inclusion both physically and social where there's been barriers there before is absolutely fantastic. So I just want to say that the inclusivity part of this is brilliant, and I think it's something that we should underestimate.
That's clear. Jim Roberts.
Thanks, I think it's a good paper, Kevin, and I welcome the funding we're getting for the Scottish Government. I think it also recognises the importance of outdoor spaces, as has been reflected by the public at large, bearing in mind the amount of outdoor activities we're all encouraged to take, during the lockdown, etc. A couple of things for me. I mean, I took a scoot around Ballochmyle Play Parks yesterday. And I would say the level of maintenance, it reflects what's in the report. I think the level of maintenance is pretty good. Yes, there is some bits and bobs needing done. And I think, again, that reflects in surface repair and some replacements. There's one or two of them are tired, and that's a kind of reflection on the age of them. But they are fit for use. I think it's important to underline that. Just a couple I would comment on. One of the ones was at the notes, apologies. Mauchline Alexander Terrace. It's not on the council list on the website, neither is Sorn. Alexander Terrace. The one at Jean Armour Drive, it's a 5-star bog. Now, I think we've tried to drain that before, but we're back to the problems with putting water into Scottish Water's infrastructure. I don't know whether we could maybe look at some form of soak away, just maybe alleviate some of the flooding problems, at the Jean Armour Drive site. The other one on the report on page 9 is for, page 8, is at Logan. It's really tired. and I welcome the installation of the inclusive equipment to that one. Again, that has flooding issues as well, so if we can maybe have a look as part of the upgrade programme to try and get some drainage into that. There is a drain beside the park, so maybe presents an opportunity to drain that facility. But overall, I think it's a decent report. I think the reflection on the maintenance is pretty good. So it reflects the good work the guys are doing. Thanks, Chair.
Tom?
No, thanks, Chair. Just a point about the comment you made about the new play parks. I don't know if a developer contribution can be used for that. Maybe that's something that could be considered, some of the surplus in there. But just in terms of this report itself, it's a good report, as Councillor McGee said. We were originally told every play park would be replaced, but we recognise that's not going to happen, and we don't need them all replaced. I think that's come out from the reports that have been done. So I welcome the ones that are there. Just a couple of questions in relation to the list of the 84 that's on the members portal. I take it that will be reviewed on a kind of regular basis, so that if things change, then the priority will change. I hope it's not cast in stone that that's the order being done, because climate and things can impact on the use of the facilities, can impact on their conditions. I hope that's been kept under review. And just in terms of the equipment that's being installed, I know these parent-child swings that have been put in one or two areas are really very, very popular with families. And is that part of what's being counted as inclusive furniture, inclusive play equipment? If we can clarify that one, thanks.
Thanks very much, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Cook. In terms of the play park review and the programme, absolutely we will keep that as a live document. As I said, there's regular and periodic inspections of our play parks to continue to monitor that conditions, and certainly the recovery, the repair and renewal budget will be there to enhance some of that work as well, so that we try and deal with things as they arise too. In that sense, so yeah, we will make sure that that's absolutely maintained. In terms of the parent and child swings, and obviously a lot of the investment programme will be working with our local communities in terms of what their needs and their desires would be, and especially if we can work with local communities to add value to what we are already doing as well, we'll absolutely take that forward with our communities. Thanks very much.
Okay, thanks, Kevin. John, you wanted back in?
Yeah, I did. Thank you. Just to go back to paragraph 4, and we're asked to make a decision based on the figures in paragraph 4. There now seems to be some doubt as to whether that is the actual figure. So, I mean, what I'm suggesting here is that we accelerate the programme. And what I'm saying is, why wait 5 years? If we can, we're getting that money. That was a government commitment. Let's accelerate the programme where we can, talk to our contractor to see if we can get it done quicker. If that contractor can't fulfil that need, then we need to talk to other contractors. There can't be only one person does play equipment. And that's what I'll be suggesting, that we accelerate this programme. I've nothing against the paper. I think it's a good plan. I think it just takes too long. And we've got a government commitment there. Then we as a council can see the needs of our communities, our young folk, etc. And let's go ahead and get this ramped up and get it out there. Thank you.
Thanks, John. I've got a lot of sympathy with that, and in terms of the point I was trying to make with the year 2 programme, if we accelerate, bring year 2 in with year 1 programme, that means that every ward is getting at least one play park. So that helps. If all 9 wards are covered, and maybe I know members have been saying look at flooding and other issues and other play parks, and gives us a chance to look at some of the areas. But I think if we can maybe do that in the first instance, I know there's a slight risk with that, but maybe that's a way. I accelerating the programme. Katie?
Thanks to you, Chair. I'm probably responding on behalf of a couple of colleagues in the room. What we'll do is, we've got the prioritisation list. We've got an extra investment through repair and renewal. So what we're going to do now is see how quickly we can do things. We will use our existing contractor because in terms of procurement, that's who has the award. We've got a great relationship with them. So what I'll do is I'll undertake to see what we can deliver a bit quicker, given the money that we have secured, and then thereafter, as further funding is announced, we would look to take it further, but we'll keep members closely informed in this. So, we've got a wee bit more money than we'd set out with because we've got this extra repair and renewal money, so we'll make the very best use of that. We've added some balances in, so if you would leave it with us, we will accelerate as best we can within our procurement and financial framework that we've got here, but obviously doing our very best to serve people and to get these done as quickly as we can. So if members will leave it with us, the big thing today is to make sure that we expend the money that we've got available to us, but we will undertake to see if we can accelerate anything further with the resource we have secured and within our procurement guidelines. And we'll come back to members on that if that's the best undertaking I can give, and we'll do our very best to take this forward.
Katie. Eddie?
Thanks, and totally supporting what colleagues have said, and just reminding it won't be long until we do get knowledge of what the 22-23 funding is. So, what you're asking, like Chair and members, you will see very early, as soon as we get an indication of the 22-23. So you'll see almost a similar list to this coming on within, early part of, of 29, this year.
Okay. Thanks.
Chair, sorry.
Sorry, David.
Chair, not to prolong matters, fully support what Katie said, and just to go back to Councillor McGee's point, it's not my understanding that anyone's suggesting there's an issue with the capacity of the contractor. It is, as set out in the paper, that question of prioritising the works. The only limitation on the amount of works is the amount of funding available, not the capacity of the contractor. Even if there were a problem with the capacity of the contractor, it would be breach of contract to simply start awarding this work to any other contractor. So as Katie said, if there is to be an increase of the programme, we will work with existing contractor, but the starting point is there's no concern about their capacity to deliver. It's about having sufficient funding to deliver as many projects as the council has appetite for. But it's not just as straightforward as that contractor in a contractual relationship with the council can't do it, we'll go and get someone else. That would put us in breach of contract.
Thanks, that's helpful advice, David. Okay, I've got a number of hands up. I'll bring in John first of all, then I think Claire's been waiting for a wee while. John?
No, thanks for that. For David there, just to put me right, I'm happy that there's no issue with the contractor. So my suggestion then is that we accelerate the programme by spending the 1.344 million that we've already acknowledged we're getting in paragraph 4, and wherever we take it for, we'll replenish that money as it comes in for the Scottish Government, and so therefore we will accelerate the programme and allow every area to get new play equipment a lot earlier, and that's my point. Thank you.
No, I mean, I'm happy with the principle of accelerating the programme, but obviously I'll listen to what Joe has to say here in terms of advice.
Thank you, Chair. I think maybe fundamentally we are accelerating the programme by recognising the draw from repairs and renewals and to allocate that £500,000 from that to bolster the programme. In terms of accelerating the programme and recognising that we would spend £1.3 million and get that back over the next 5 years, the source then is where does the 1.3 come from? It either comes from the general fund uncommitted balance, which is at 2.4%, and that would be a real challenge in doing so. Or it comes from repairs and renewals, and if it comes from repairs and renewals, then the repairs and renewals fund is fully exhausted, it's fully committed to, and there's only 1.4 left in it after we take the £500,000 out. So it's about the source of that funding, and the options are either general uncommitted balance or repairs and renewals, in which case you're taking 1 to 0 and 1 to a level that I would not recommend we do. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm happy to follow that advice, so I'm happy to, in principle, try and accelerate the programme where we can. And plus to other members, Who's next? Fiona. Then Claire Maitland.
Thanks, Dougie. No, just to say I'm very pleased that Scottish Government funding is coming into Ward 4. I know that's parochial, but I'm sorry. Glad it's coming in to upgrade the play parks. As Kevin said in his presentation, play parks play a really important role in the health and well-being of children. So I'm really happy about this. It's a good news story. Thanks.
Thanks, Fiona. Claire?
Thanks, Leader. Echoing what Fiona just said there, absolutely agree that the parks have become so important during COVID and will continue to do so. We're talking about 5 years to come out of this, so a 5-year plan for a park seems to be quite a good idea. However, you raised what is obviously my concern is the lack of park and short leaves. Now, if we're going to accelerate this process, why can't we accelerate it to include the new parks? So a few questions. How do we identify the areas that need the new parks? Is there a formula that we use for it? For example, one of the categories was how often the park was used or how used the park was. But I mean, these seem like vague factors. I'd quite like to know the methodology behind it, but obviously we can take that off the table and I could get that at another time. But was SMDIs taken into consideration? And have we also counted things like the little parks that the developers put up in short leases? I don't have anything like that in Ward 5 either. So how do we identify the missing parks? Can we include it into the accelerated programme? I'm quite concerned that my ward will be waiting again for a park, and we shouldn't be afraid of vandalism. We shouldn't anticipate that everything's going to get damaged. I see other parks in nice areas being damaged too. So yes, I'm being parochial and I really want to know what's happening in Ward 5 over the next 5 years. Thank you.
Thanks, Claire. I mean, historically, there's always been a problem in terms of your recurring costs in terms of maintenance once you increase the number up from 84. But again, as I said at the start, I mean, I think we really have to make sure that all areas are covered with good play equipment, no matter where they are. And I know there's a suggestion about developer contributions, but these tend to be located in large swathes of social housing areas that are, that we've had problems. And I remember historically we had alluded to the fire at Alton Hill, and that was one of the reasons that kind of made us move our parts elsewhere. But I think we need to have another go at this and just look at what play equipment can go in these areas and get funded from where we can. But Katie, I think that's something maybe a wee bit separate from this programme just now, but it's something you really need to look at. Katie.
Yeah, through you, Chair. Yeah, this goes back quite a long way. So we haven't invested in new parks for quite a long time. As you can see, there used to be a long time ago we did have a play development strategy that looked to that, and we had specific criteria working with Play Scotland, and that's really how we've got the ones that we've got, Councillor. However, you're absolutely right. This is a new time, and we need to look again at this. I would say though that this paper really concentrates on investing in our current portfolio, but what we will do is return to Cabinet with looking at that from a strategic perspective in terms of new developments, linking with community and come back. There would be resource attached to that, and that's something I would need to discuss in detail with colleagues, because we'd like most likely to the capital programme, and that would be for members to determine if that was something that we would invest in for the future. So if you would leave it with us, Councillor, it's a really good point. It's a wee bit like housing. We maintain our stock and we do a housing improvement. This is like the HIP programme for play parks, but we do new builds as well, and we've been able to do that because we've got really good grant funding for that, but we do put capital into it as well. So it may be that we look at a very similar approach where we look at maintaining and developing our existing stock to make it inclusive and keep it in good condition as best we can, but also that we consider where new investment is required based on demography and where people need us most, because that's changed over time as well. So if you leave that one with us, early probably into the new financial year, we'll have a look at that strategically. We'll link with colleagues in Play Scotland and our own own play development team have got good expertise in this area, and we'll come back with a consolidated view on it. And it is something, though, that would require investment, and Kevin's indicated it could be 90 to 150 odd for a new park, depending on what we're serving, and then that would be for members to determine if we were able to allocate resource. It would be a capital resource, and I need to spend some time with Joe and the capital programme looking at that. But if you leave it with us, and you almost see that as a separate programme, I think that would allow us to take it forward.
If I could just come in as well, please. Under the Planning Act, there is a requirement to undertake a place sufficiency exercise under the 2019 Planning Act. The details of what's involved in that have yet to be released by the Scottish Government, but clearly that's something which was important for its inclusion in the Planning Act, and so we will be working with colleagues in communities to actually carry out that exercise. But that's something for the future, and we can work closely with Katie and colleagues to actually undertake that. Exactly what's involved, as I say, there's no detail at the moment, but that will become part of the planning, the next plan, basically, and it's probably one piece of work that will stand on its own, but nevertheless will contribute to the next plan.
Yeah, no, I mean, I looked to the, some of the there's some small parts that were in my own ward that were put in by developers, Rugby Park, for example, and that's good, it's doing a good job. But on the other hand, we've got Long Park, Knockinlaw and Alton Hill and Central North, which are all clustered together, which is, one of the biggest high clusters of deprivation that we've got in the whole East Ayrshire, and there's no single play park there. That's just, and we know the historic reasons why that's been, because of vandalism, but that's something that I think we really need to look forward. And it's the same, Clare, in Shortleys South. You've got the play park in the middle of Burn Park, but further south than that, there's nothing. And I think that's something we really need to look separate. And I'm quite sure that's just areas I know probably could be similar in other areas too, with Kilmarnock. That's something. But when we get back to the paper here, I mean, I think this is a good use of resources to upgrade the play parks, the 84 parks that we've got. And there is a bit of sympathy here about accelerating the programme, but I think we've got to listen to the advice that Joe's given us. So I'm trying to get away, formal words that kind of listens to what the arguments that John's putting forward too, something that we can do that says, well, given the opportunities, we'll try and accelerate the programme where we can. And I'm asking also to think about that while I bring in Neil to have a think about a possible way forward. Neil.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to add my pleasure at the paper. I think it's really helpful. However, I think we should be looking seriously at expediting this as quickly as possible. Remember, kids don't remain kids for too long. A 5-year programme means they'll be in second year by the time the swings are painted. And I'm being a bit facetious, but I think it's an important comment. And some of the usage problems have been affected by conditions of the land round about the system, where you need waders sometimes to get near them. And again, I'm being a bit facetious, but it's an important programme, as Dougie said earlier. Kids need recreation. They need something, especially at the time of COVID. But I think if we have an opportunity to spend that money just now and put it back in the bank in the near future, then we should jump at it. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Jackie.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'd just like to echo again, a lot of this has been said, but obviously I'm very pleased that the monies came from the Scottish Government. I'm generally pleased about the spread of parks that's across the area that's been proposed in the upgrade. Bearing in mind what's already been said, I think that in terms of acceleration, year 1 and 2 together is a good idea and should be pursued. But unlike some of what's been said, I'm a bit concerned about the idea of spending money, because for what I'm hearing, a lot of the equipment has been deemed to be in good working order. So I would be a bit like, why on earth would I replace equipment that's in good working order just now taking money away from another source when I know that I can spread it across, because surely if you replace it just now, you then need to replace it quicker. So that would be my only point on that. So thank you.
Thanks, Jackie. It's a good point, because most of the play equipment is in good working order, but there's issues with the matting. But I've seen my small tour of some of the play parks recently, and some of the graffiti. You know, so it's the actual equipment sound, and some of us zip wires. Folk, maybe adults jumping on them there. There's a lot of them seem to be broken. I'm not looking at anything, but I think there's mainly that the play equipment goes in good repair, but it does need a wee bit of freshening up, some of it, and where you get health and safety issues like that, we need to repair that without really much delay. So you know, that's where I would suggest we're just talking about refurbishing mainly equipment in the first instance, and I would like to, you know, maybe get a form of words that maybe we can accelerate the programme. Can officers help me in terms of Katie?
I'll do my best, Leader. So I think in point 2, in terms of recommendations, approve the draw from the, no, sorry, point 1, approve the proposed upgrade of the Council's play parks as outlined within paragraphs 13 to 15 in Appendix A, and accelerate into future years where possible within existing resources and procurement arrangements, something around that. So actually what I'm doing is making sure we've got the resource and we're hitting with our procurement, but we'll take it forward where possible. So it's almost like the combination of years 1 and 2, but I don't want to say that because I need to go back and have a look at it. So I don't want to say it in the chamber. So if you're comfortable with adding that, accelerate where possible within existing resources and using existing procurement arrangements.
Okay, thanks. Is Joe, you happy with that? Thanks. Okay, another hand up. Jim Roberts.
No, sorry, I'm going to take my hand down based on you know, what Katie's just said. I'm happy with that. Thanks.
Okay, just is that something we can all sign up to? John?
Aye, thanks, Chair. Just for clarity, I mean, there were no suggestion when I'm talking about acceleration of replacing good equipment. That certainly wasn't my intention. That just to make that clear, the acceleration was to make sure that every area could have could see the benefit of what we were doing quicker instead of having to wait for 5 years. And I'm prepared to accept the words that Katie's agreed at point Roman numeral 1.
Thanks, John. No, I mean, that's what you say. I accept what you're saying there. It wasn't about new equipment, it was about refurbishment and getting there quicker to the finishing line if we ever do. And I think separately we maybe look at a report looking at play in other areas. I don't know if we can put that in a recommendation. Just I'll bear in a minute and we can do that. Okay, with that, can we agree the recommendations? Okay, thanks very much. And fourth, National Planning Framework Draft. Carol.
Thank you, Chair. This report provides background to the National Planning Framework. It summarises the content of the draft National Planning Framework and gives the Council's initial response to the draft as well. So it's quite a detailed report, and just at the outset, whilst we give some initial responses, a more detailed response will be prepared and will be brought back to Cabinet in due course. In paragraphs 3 to 7, we provide some background information to NPF 4. A call for ideas went out from Scottish Government in January 2020, which the Council did respond to. And then in November 2020, a position statement was published by the Scottish Government again, which we responded to. So we have been involved in the preparation of the National Planning Framework from the very beginning, but just to state that we have not been involved in the drafting of the report itself. We first saw it when it was published in November last year, November 2021. As we've said, it's out now to consultation. There's a public consultation exercise on the draft, and this will be our response in addition to the detailed one, which will come back before the closure. The closure of the consultation period is the 31st of March of this year. The NPF was delayed substantially for obvious reasons because of the pandemic, which has had significant implications for the preparation of our own local development plan. Suffice to say, at the present time, it is causing some difficulties in terms of ensuring that there is they both complement each other, because NPF 4, when it is approved, will formally become part of the local development plan for East Ayrshire. So it is an important document for us, and we need to make sure that they are complementary and do integrate. In saying that, going to paragraph 10, there's nothing much in terms of the NPF that we would object to. Paragraph 10 indicates some of the key themes that NPF 4 and draft identify: sustainable places, livable places, productive places, distinctive places, no issue with that whatsoever. And then some of the principles, overarching principles, are also identified in paragraph 10 there. Again, we've got no issues with any of that whatsoever. There's a lot of the content, therefore, we are content with and have no real difficulties with at all. The paragraph 12 actually does indicate that East Ayrshire is incorporated within the Central Belt Transformation Area, Action Area, the Central Urban, I should say, Transformation Area. And whilst we do have some urban areas, we are also a rural authority as well. So some of the issues are that, you know, the actions which are identified for the Central Belt Transformation Area don't sometimes quite fit with East Ayrshire, but that is something that we'll comment in more detail on later in the year. What is really important for us is the implementation of NPF 4, and from paragraph 15 onwards, it indicates how they're actually going to do this. And again, we've got no real issue with the principle. Aligning resources, infrastructure first, identifying national developments, and they've done that from the very beginning of the National Planning Framework process, and development plan policy and regional spatial strategies. No issue at all with that. But the question is, how are they going to do that? How are they going to align resources with the content of NPF 4? How are they going to help places such as East Ayrshire to ensure that infrastructure is put in first? Particularly, you know, areas such as East Ayrshire are not as dynamic, let's say, for example, economically wise, as Edinburgh. And therefore, for developers in this location to actually put infrastructure in first is much more difficult. And so we do need a lot more detail and more information about how they're actually going to carry these things through. In terms of the national developments, there's none specifically within East Ayrshire. That's no different from the current one or the previous one to that as well. So we've got no issues with the national developments, although I would say that there are some national developments which are cross-cutting, which cut across much of Scotland, for example, the Central Scotland Green Network, and that includes East Ayrshire. So we are involved in some of the national developments, although not any specific one. In terms of housing, this is a very significant change from current practice. For the first time, the housing numbers, the number of houses that we need to plan for within East Ayrshire have been produced not by East Ayrshire Council as a planning authority, but by officials and the National Planning Framework. You'll see in paragraph 16, they were suggesting at the outset that we only needed 350 houses over a 10-year period within East Ayrshire. We strongly disagreed with that as a council and as officials. And through negotiation, we have now come to agreement with officials that the number should be 4,050 over the 10-year period, which is very similar to the figure that we're working to, which we generated as part of the current LDP. So a lot of discussion actually went into that figure. It's now within the actual National Planning Framework, but it could be changed. It's subject to change, and it's subject to, obviously, objection by the housing developers or others. So, but that's the figure that we're actually planning for, 4,050. for LDP2. As indicated, the timing is something of real concern to us. It's over a year delayed NPF4, and that has had significant implications for LDP2 because it will form part of the local development plan. Our local development plan is 5 years old in April 2022 this year. We obviously adopted it in April 2017, and in the interim we prepared the Minerals Local Development Plan for East Ayrshire. And it's only in the last two and a bit years that we've been working on the preparation of LDP2, and we're close to actually finalising that document itself. We will then bring LDP2 to Council before the end of the financial year and before the 5 years are up, shall we say, in terms of the adoption of the current local development plan. But what we're saying is that we've got a draft national planning framework which provides part of the local development plan that is subject to change. And whilst we can at the present time take on board the national planning framework as drafted, we will be unable obviously to take on board the final approved national planning framework as part of the local development plan process. If the original timetable for NPF4 had been held, we would have had no real difficulty. We would have had in front of us an approved, adopted national planning framework, and we would have been able to take that on board and present that as part of LDP2 in March, for example, this year. But we're not able to do that, and therefore we're having to take certain steps to ensure that our plan is integrated with the national planning framework. What we are proposing, therefore, to do is to take on board as much as we possibly can at the present time in LDP2, recognising that it will be subject to change because of the consultation exercise. We will, after approval of Council of LDP2, we will have to go out to consultation for a minimum of 2-month period. We will receive objections and representations to LDP2, and what we are proposing, therefore, is that in terms of we will not respond formally and bring our formal responses to the representations and objections to LDP2 until the National Planning Framework is finalised and approved by Scottish Government, or the Scottish Parliament, I should say. Once it's approved, we will take the final approved NPF4 content into account in terms of the representations to our local development plan and the responses that we will prepare to those. And then we will submit it. Once it's approved by Council, then we will submit our plan to examination. So it's a bit convoluted, unfortunately. It's nothing that we can do about that. We just have to respond to the fact that the timetable is as it is, and we're responding as best we possibly can. In terms of, as we indicated, paragraph 23, in terms of the fit of East Ayrshire within the central urban transformation, there are some issues there which we want to develop more and bring more detail back to Cabinet. There are issues with regard to the infrastructure first, because East Ayrshire, in terms of its economy, is not as dynamic, as we said previously, as other areas. And there are issues with regard to how do we ensure that infrastructure, the capacity of interchanges or junctions or sewerage, etc., is put in place before development actually occurs. So there are issues there for us, and we'll bring more detail in relation to these matters to Cabinet later in March. The other key issue for us is regional spatial strategies. We are obliged to prepare a regional spatial strategy. It's not, however, forming part of the National Planning Framework, and there are some issues, therefore, between the relationship between our regional spatial strategies and the National Planning Framework. How can we improve that relationship? So again, we will bring that more detail on that matter to Council later. One or two other comments in relation to NPF4 in terms of paragraph 24 in more detailed issues for us is that since the National Planning Framework will form part of the local development plan, we do want it to have a vision for 2050. We do want it to actually indicate more clearly what they're planning for in terms of population, on the economy, what objectives they have. That could be clearer so that we can integrate our plan more effectively. We're obliged to have a vision for the future and we want NPF 4 to do the same, so that we can marry into that, because the two plans have to be seen as one in planning terms. So we want that. We want greater clarity also about the issues of flooding and brownfield land. As we know from previous reports being brought to Cabinet, there are significant issues in terms of flooding. It seems to lack commentary. It mentions that there is an issue there, but it doesn't go into it in much detail how it will be tackled. So that's an important one that we want to comment on. The local place plans, we are obliged, again, under the new Planning Act, to prepare and support the preparation of local place plans. That doesn't seem to be given much reference in the NPF 4. But another key thing for us is the wording of policy. NPF 4 will be a policy document as well as a spatial document. As I said, it's part of the LDP, Local Development Plan. Some of the wording is a little bit imprecise. We've been picked up in the past in terms of our own wording of policy with regard to that, and unfortunately we will have to do the same with regard to the Scottish Government, because some of it's a bit woolly and it's not too clear exactly what the intention is. So again, we will provide more detail in relation to that. But the other key thing is resources. This is an important document for East Ayrshire or for any council within Scotland. What's lacking is how this document, National Planning Framework, fits with other documents, particularly resources and funding documents. Where does it sit? What are the relationships between them? It's just missing from NPF 4 at the moment. We need to understand that. The Scottish Government and officials need to understand that, and it needs to be much, much clearer. Because if you could understand how things relate, how documents relate to each other, then you can understand where the resources are going to come, how we are going to ensure that infrastructure first is actually placed first, etc. So there's a lot of clarity, more clarity required in terms of where this document sits in relation to others as well. So I've spoken enough, I think. This provides a background to NPF 4. The recommendations are detailed in paragraph 2. You will see them there. But as I say, now that we've got the background there, and if this is approved, we will provide a more detailed response prior to the deadline of 31st of March. I'm happy to take any questions that members have on the report or NPF 4. Thank you.
Thanks, Carol. I've got to say, what on the surface looks quite a dry report. It's quite interesting, quite a and to some degree quite alarming. And I think you made the point absolutely correct. Where does it fit with other government policies and other policy documents? We've led the way, and it's part of government policy to encourage placemaking, and we've went big with that, in particular the smaller communities. And it's rightly so that we give that power to our communities. We're not particularly a centralist authority. We encourage our communities to design or build communities the way they want to choose, and we accept that our communities are very much diverse right across East Ayrshire. But it's absolutely breathtaking in terms of, when you see planning for to say 350 units over 10 years, my God, we can build that in West Kilmarnock or Sturton on its own, in 5 years, or maybe 2 or 3 years. And I think, it's just something that looks to me as if some civil servant is just looking at the population growth in East Ayrshire, as we know, is something like 1.8 or 1 point something other. It's just barely is growing, but just slightly. And you really wonder, about it. And, if we had taken that stance and suggesting 4,000 plus housing, it could be actually even more, Carol, when you see, I know property prices in Kilmarnock have been up 20%. I think that's even higher in Sturton. But right across East Ayrshire, property prices have been up in the last year, but 20% in 1 year. That shows you where the demand is. And for them to suggest that we only build 350 houses in 10 years, it's just a lack of reality. And it's not even particularly granular. It's, there is a north-south, there is kind of big spatial issues in the East Ayrshire that are very obvious. And you just worry what kind of information the civil servants are looking at to produce figures like this, because it's got catastrophic consequences for the construction industry.
And that's the reason why we rejected it, to be perfectly honest, outrightly rejected it. To give them their due, they did actually indicate that was the starting point, 350 was the starting point, but nevertheless it was based on long-term population and household projections. We've always had difficulties and issues with regard to the process. What we deal with within our offices and planning applications is actually what's happening on the ground here. And as you say, we're building over 350 houses a year within East Ayrshire on average. So we need to plan for that, we need to deal with that. And that's why we objected to the 350 figure. Again, given their due, they worked with us and they accepted. Although we did have a number of meetings, we did come to agreement relatively straightforwardly based on the information that we provided for them. And I think our team did an extremely good job. When you look at other council areas, particularly within Ayrshire, I think we've done a very good job in getting the figures in the local development plan. We've just had a meeting about a week or so ago with the house builders, and they were much happier with our figure as well. So whilst the process in terms of consultation still has to play out, and there may well be objections to that number from others, or even possibly the house builders, there's no doubt in my mind that we're much closer to what actually is happening and what we need to plan for with the 4,050 within the plan itself.
Yes, I mean, it's absolutely critical that we continue to grow and we continue to tackle not just greenfield sites and brownfield sites as well, and we've got that capacity to do so. And I find it quite ironic, you know, when we do object to some of the larger scale developments, the government does call it in and overturns our decision. You know, I mean, it's bizarre, but I think we need to pay close attention to this. And maybe the other just thing to mention, I think, you know, the more and more information, I don't know that all the members have been, you know, having discussions about the LDB2. I think we really need in placemaking. We really need. I know we've been looking at a word-to-word basis, but I think in terms of Kilmarnock, we really need to look at it in a community basis, and that should cover the 4 Kilmarnock wards. I think we need to, you know, I've been, and the other members from Ward 3 have been looking at, but I think, you know, particularly given, you know, thinking like this, I think we need to really think long and hard what we're doing for every individual community. And I think, you know, we're the largest community. I think we really need to think, you know, really joined up thinking, because we're not getting any joined up thinking from above. But look at some of this, Carol.
Well, I think that's right. We're looking at obviously communities such as Kilmarnock as part of the LDP2, and we're looking at it as a community as well as parts of you know, parts of Kilmarnock as well. And as you know, we're doing a substantial amount of work in relation to the town centre and south central Kilmarnock, linked into the whole issue of flooding and brownfield land. So that will form a major part of the LDP2, which is coming, you know, as I say, in March. To members. There has been a bit of delay with LDP2 as a result of some work that we've been undertaking with modelling of the transport and traffic implications of the plan, and obviously we've been working closely with Transport Scotland. It's taken a bit longer to go through that process with them, and that's one of the reasons, key reasons why there's been a bit of a delay in bringing this to you. But we will bring the plan LDP2 to Council before the 5 years is up. So that's at the end, before the end of March.
Thanks, Carol. So I'll shut up and let others in. Jim Roberts.
Thanks very much, Dougie. Carol, thanks for your presentation. I think you've pretty well nailed it. You've highlighted the difficulties that we face in regard to this. Also linking into LDP2, and I think I've got to commend the good work you and your colleagues have done on the LDP2 and also my fellow elected members. It's not going to be easy, and you see how the two of them are meant to interact. And I think the more you look into it, the more concerns we have. When you look at, say, for example, paragraph 12, no very little mention about Ayrshire in the entire document, and I think that's where we do have to, you know, defend our position. And hit the ball increasingly harder. The whole of Ayrshire is going to have to do that, you know, to make sure we get the right outcomes. But I think when you look at some of the, you know, the aspirations, you know, the 20-minute neighbourhoods, you know, that's going to be extremely difficult to achieve. You know, when you look at East Ayrshire, you know, as a whole, and not just East Ayrshire, South Ayrshire as well, some of the rural communities there. The flooding issue is one that's rumbling along. We don't seem to have any resolution to, and you see the impact on that, in the town of Kilmarnock. That's got serious implications for Kilmarnock going forward. But, we're not seeing any resolution whatsoever going forward, so that's something outstanding as well. The Ayrshire growth deal is so important to us, and there seems to be a lack of detail there. The link into the economic scenario, the traffic, the Transport Scotland, and indeed the Brownfield interchange. We're making progress on that, some progress, but not as much as we would like. Bearing in mind it's the arterial interchange, not just for East Ayrshire as well. But I think probably one of the biggest ones, and it's highlighted in your report at page 17, and the lack of commentary on the local place plans and how they fit the NPF4. We've worked so hard in terms of the local plans, and that is a big concern, because that is an important one to all the communities, linking into the community wealth building as well. So I'm going to shut up. I'm going to let somebody else in. I'm just going to commend the good work you and your team and the all council officers have done, not just in LDP2, but working towards getting the best we can for the NPA4. So thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Jim, and thanks for your work too on this. Tom?
Thanks, Chair. I think Jim has covered a lot of the points I was going to make, but the first point is this disparity between 350 houses and the 4,000. How we come up with that? They come up with that figure in the first place when that wouldn't even meet our requirement for affordable housing across the 10-year plan in East Ayrshire. So, and Dougie said, I think the civil servant has picked this out of thin air somewhere and just stuck it in the report because there's no logic. To get it out by a factor of more than 10, I mean, it's just absolutely stupidity. So I don't know how that figure came in there in the first place. The other points that Jim made about growth deal, I mean, that is key to our future development for the whole of Ayrshire. So that has to be recognised. And the fact that really there is no mention of Ayrshire very little mention of Ayrshire as a whole in the document, it's just kind of lumped in with the central belt. We're a unique entity in Ayrshire. We've got lots of attractions, but we've got lots of issues as well. And around roads and infrastructure, we haven't got the connectivity that we really need to develop our area properly, and that has to be addressed. The 20-minute neighbourhood, Jim again highlighted. How do we achieve that in a lot of our rural areas? That's not going to be easy. And finally, just from me, the flooding point, I mean, that is a huge stumbling block to the development of brownfield land in Kilmarnock and in other places, mainly in Kilmarnock, because we've huge areas of brownfield land now that are effectively no-go areas for any building work to take place. So we have to get some kind of conclusion to that and a way forward to enable us to do something with that land. So I think that's the key points from me. And thanks, Carol, for the report. Really good, and obviously look forward to seeing the next stages as things come forward. But I think if we're going with 350 houses, we'd have every house built in Ayrshire jumping down our throats saying, where are we going to go? We'll have to lay everybody off. So, we need to fight that one. Thanks.
Thanks, Tom. Carol, you want to come out?
Yeah, if I maybe just deal with each one in turn. The 350, yes, was based on, as I say, projections, household and population projections. And it doesn't deal with the reality of what actually is happening on the ground. So we did have productive discussions with colleagues in the Scottish Government, and we are now happy with the 4,050. It's very, very similar to the figure that we've got in the current local development plan, and we're happy with that. And that deals with what actually is happening on the ground itself. So we are content with that. And clearly, there's always a prospect of it being adjusted because it's just a draft NPF4. However, I don't anticipate any significant change to that figure, if at all. And I don't think the house builders want to rock the boat either, because they're content with that figure by the looks of things likewise. So I don't anticipate any changes there. That the Ayrshire growth deal it's not mentioned much in the National Planning Framework, you're right to say. I think one of the reasons for that is because we're We started much later than many of the city deals. The city deals are referred to more often in NPF4, and I think primarily it's because they've been worked up more. They've had more time to work them up. We're still working through some of the key detailed projects of the Ayrshire Growth Deal, but that's the reason why we wanted to produce LDP2. We're one of only 3, I think, councils in all of Scotland which are producing a local plan at the moment. All the rest are waiting for the guidance under the new Planning Act. And so basically they'll not be undertaking development planning work. They may be doing some preparatory work, but they're not undertaking development planning work. That's the reason why we decided to undertake LDP2, to ensure that our plan identifies the Ayrshire Growth Deal sites that we have. And we've prepared a lot of background information to support the identification of the Ayrshire Growth Deal sites within LDP2 to make sure that they are complementary to the National Planning Framework as well. So we are doing that. Other things to say is that we've done a lot of modelling, transport modelling. We spent a fair bit of time in transport modelling, and what we've done is modelled East Ayrshire as a whole, and it fits to the national picture or the regional picture, but we've also got much more detailed modelling of various interchanges. For example, the Brownfield interchange, that's modelled as well separately, so it stands on its own. The Moorfield area has been modelled separately, as well as Kilmarnock North has been modelled separately. So the junctions, as you were coming south, for example, we all know that we've got to come off a few miles at Fenwick, more or less, to actually gain access. From there down to Kilmarnock, it's all been modelled separately. So we've got 3 sub-models which stand on their own within an East Ayrshire, which relates to the national. So we've been doing all of that work in preparation for obviously presentation to council later this year. In terms of flooding, we are completing a report on flooding, which does take a look at things in a different way. Rather than building large walls or embankments, we are looking at a different approach to managing flooding. I don't yet have that report in front of me, but I have been in discussion with the consultants, and at the outset they weren't too sure exactly what the outcome would be of that study, but as they've gone into it and examined the issues in more detail, they're warming towards the concept that we put in front of them. So there may well be solutions, but that is just a solution. It's how we actually implement it that we will need to work on, and that's one of the key issues for us. Even though we have a solution there and it's in conformity with the NPF, the important is implementing it, and that's where resources need to come. And I think if we as a council will need to look at the resources that we've got to ensure that there is implementation of some key projects. But that's a separate issue for us for another time. Local place plans, our proposals is just to continue doing what we are doing at the moment with some tweaking on the back of some comments that you've made and other members have made. We are proposing to carry on with that. Again, that was another reason why we wanted to do LDP2, because our communities are involved in the local placemaking process, and we as a council have accepted their plans and have adopted their plans as part of our national, part of our local development plan. That's unusual, and we will continue to do that. Local place plans under the 2019 Act will not have status, the same status that we have given to our placemaking maps. They will not have the same status, and that is a concern that they're going backwards from where we are at the moment. And that's one of the reasons why we wanted to continue, because we can do so procedurally. If we continue with the LDP, we can use the old procedures, which do allow us to, shall we say, adopt placemaking plans as part of the local development plan. But we are, again, I think, unique in Scotland in relation to that. But it's something that we want to continue with. It has been held up, the placemaking plans have been held up because of the pandemic, but nevertheless, what we are doing is, I think, personally, infinitely better than local place plans because of the approach that we're taking. And hopefully that answers some of the questions that Councillor Cook has given us.
Thanks, Carol. John?
Aye, thanks, Chair. I think, Carol, you've covered the the points I was going to make, but I just want to ask maybe a couple in a different way. Obviously, paragraph 24 causes a bit of concern after all the hard work we've done in the Ayrshire growth deal and how important it is to the whole area, that it's not reflected, I think, is a serious concern. The other point, paragraph 16, I mean, obviously a huge disparity between 350 and 4,050 house numbers, but as somebody that sat in this council since 2003 and been repeatedly told that nobody's ever wanted, the house builders don't want to build in the south of the authority. And every house I see getting built in Auchinleck and Cumnor and elsewhere are sold, and there are folk staying in them. I think shows that we could build houses anywhere in Ayrshire, in East Ayrshire, and people have a demand to stay in them. But at the same time, when we go to 4,050 and we talk about house building in Stewarton, here's one of our major towns that hasn't even got a park, and they're still want to build more houses. So what we need to do is get the infrastructure right. And the people for Stewarton, it's very, very difficult to get to, if they're commuting, it's easy enough to get the train when they're running in time, but to try and get to the motorway, they've got to encounter 3 of the most dangerous roads in Ayrshire to get there. So infrastructure is very important. And another issue is, I think there's real issues with the house building that we're doing on coalescence. I think now we're breaching what I would have seen as natural boundaries, coming from Kilmarnock towards Kilmores, going from Kilmarnock towards Finnick. So there's some concerns that I've got. Thank you.
Thanks, John. I think we shared some of these concerns, absolutely. And you just wonder, this underestimating, population growth is, underestimating requirements for infrastructure, and that we're underestimating the success of the growth deal. Further to that growth, but the market tends not to lie. You just see some of the property price increases locally, and we're in the top of the league in Scotland in terms of percentage increases. Carol, then I'll finish off with Katie with some concluding remarks. Carol.
Yeah, I think the Ayrshire growth deal is, it ties in with the work that we've been doing with LDP2. When we signed the Ayrshire growth deal, heads of terms and the agreement, the Ayrshire growth deal agreement, we did identify some locations for some of the projects, but not for them all. LDP2 will identify sites for all of the Ayrshire growth deal projects, and that's one of the reasons, as I said, we wanted to produce LDP2 so that it's within our plan and it will be consistent, therefore, with the National Planning Framework, because that National Planning Framework will be approved sometime in summer of this year. So part of our local development plan is in preparation and part's already approved. So we need to make sure that what we say in relation to the Ayrshire growth deal in LDP2 is consistent with the National Planning Framework. So we've done the work and we will identify the specific sites within LDP2. And if that is accepted, then the both parts of the plan, shall we say, are going to be complementary. I would agree with Councillor McGee that housing, if developers build in the southern part and other parts of East Ayrshire, not just Kilmarnock or the northern parts, the houses will sell. I agree as well with regard to infrastructure, and particularly in Stewarton, we have recognised that there are infrastructure issues in Stewarton, and we've been working closely with colleagues in education, as well as on the leisure side of things, looking at the infrastructure side of things. Again, that is concluding at the moment. We've just received some information and we've been working with the community and others in relation to that. That's coming together. It will be brought to Members Officers Working Group first for LDP2. So the outcome of all of that work will come forward to the Members Officers Working Group before it comes to Council. Coalescence issues, well, again, that is something we have identified sites, all of the sites, and again, through the Members Officer Working Group, all of the housing sites have now been identified, with the exception, I think, of Stewarton. But as I said, that will be brought to the Members Officer Working Group first. And the issues, therefore, of coalescence can be discussed there at Members Officers Working Group. So, yeah, all the pieces are now coming together and there's a substantial number of pieces, but they are now coming together, and hopefully that will put East Ayrshire in a good place when it comes to NPF4, because we do have an up-to-date local plan with one of the key drivers for that plan, the Ayrshire Growth Deal. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Chair. It's just to augment what Carol said, this is really important legislation, and lucky for us, I've been invited to speak next Wednesday at the National Planning Conference, and I'm the only council rep on that, so I'm going to take the opportunity to talk about East Ayrshire's experience, the Ayrshire Growth Deal, also how this links with wealth building and the legislation that's currently being considered around that as well. So it'll be a really good opportunity to put East Ayrshire on a national stage. I think sometimes, as Carol's pointed out, we're sometimes one step ahead of the game, and sometimes when you're a pioneer, it's a difficult place to be. And I'm working alongside Carol's team to make sure I'm fully briefed to cover all the areas, but also to really focus on our success around, placemaking being one of the first, around community power, and some of the other areas that we're considering is going forward as a part of LDP2. So another opportunity really to share our story on the national stage and influence this, because we need to influence this so that it aligns for the people that we serve.
Well, that's good to hear. That's the meeting with a bit of confidence. That's good to hear that that's happening. That's good, quite encouraging. Anyone else? Okay, can we go to the recommendations and agree the recommendations? Okay, I now move, next item is move exclusion of press and public, and go to the so it's going to have to do a lateral flow test already. Go to the final item, Amanda, the voluntary retirement.